One of those films that has grown over time. People, have such a fondness for it. Why do you think that is? What do you think the magic of that film was?
Before YouTube, TikTok, and anyone believing a screen could change their fate, a movie said it could. When The Last Starfighter was released, it looked like a fun story about a poor teenager and a mysterious arcade game. Deep down, however, it tapped into the fear that screens, games, and computers might secretly be able to control or choose us, instead of just entertaining us. It wasn't the loudest movie of its era, but its heart and CGI effects helped it survive far beyond its budget, which is exactly why the secrets behind its production remain just as compelling today as the story on screen. So before you reach for your gamepad again, here are 20 surprising facts you never knew about The Last Starfighter. Number 20. The movie came from a world afraid of war, technology, and the future. To understand why The Last Starfighter meant so much in 1984, you have to look at the time it was made. Ronald Reagan was the US president, and the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union was still very tense. Both sides were locked in a technological and political battle, and many people believed that a real-life war could begin at any moment, even in space. At the time, the United States had just announced a new space defense plan called the Strategic Defense Initiative, which the public referred to as the Star Wars program. It promised to use satellites and futuristic lasers to protect America from enemy missiles. The idea captured the public imagination and prompted people to think deeply about the future of war and technology. On the other side of this spectrum, film has always been one of the most powerful ways to reflect these ideas, because movies help people understand the world, think about their place in it, and even change how they act. Movies draw inspiration from real life, encompassing politics, technology, society, and culture, and transform those ideas into emotional stories that can be experienced, felt, and remembered. The Last Starfighter was one of those movies. Although it looked like a fun science fiction adventure about a poor teenager who gets chosen by a video game to fight a distant war, the story reflected real-world fears. It evoked memories of the Cold War, the growing tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, and the increasing concern that modern technology might draw people into global conflict. The idea of a young man being recruited to defend Earth against a faraway threat reflected how nervous, excited, and unsure about the future people felt. So, if a simple movie could carry all those fears and dreams, what other secrets might be hiding just beneath its surface? Number 19. It used real arcade dreams to turn gamers into heroes. Did you know that the arcade world inspired The Last Starfighter? Some people think arcade games are just loud machines in pizza shops and shopping malls. However, during the early 1980s, they were much more than that. It was a place where teenagers gathered, talked, cheered, and competed with one another. But what went through their minds when they played these games? Games like Galaga, Defender, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and Asteroids became legends of that golden arcade age. Many of them, especially the space shooters, sparked a powerful fantasy. Kids didn't just want high scores. They wanted to fly real ships, defeat alien enemies, and become heroes in the stars. That dream was exactly what The Last Starfighter brought to life when it landed in theaters on July 13, 1984. Directed by Nick Castle and written by Jonathan R. Betuel, it told the story of Alex Rogan, a small-town teenager who beats an arcade game and learns it was a secret test sent from another planet. What started at a rundown trailer park arcade became a mission to save the entire universe. The timing couldn't have been better. Audiences were already living inside arcades, and the film utilized that reality to blur the lines between fantasy and reality. It treated video games as gateways, but why did that simple idea feel so powerful? The Last Starfighter didn't just use science fiction for flashy effects. It used the heart of sci-fi, which is centered around imagination, speculation about the future, space travel, technology, aliens, and questions about how innovation might change society. And as you all know, good science fiction makes people wonder, what if? This film did exactly that. And most importantly, it demonstrated how imagination can transform a person's life. Alex's success in the game came from his strategy, focus, creativity, and belief in possibilities. What he trained in his mind translated into real-world bravery. It told a whole generation that just because you were trapped in a small space didn't mean you couldn't change the universe. Number 18. Thanks to DVD technology, a lost shot was finally fixed. Most fans don't realize that for years people weren't seeing The Last Starfighter the way it was meant to be seen. During the movie's opening sequence, when the camera appears to pull backwards from the planet Rylos across space to Earth, production designer Ron Cobb called it a cosmic backward zoom. But when the movie was released on VHS in the 1980s and early 1990s, home video could not display widescreen. Instead, most tapes were shown in pan and scan, which trimmed off the sides of the image to fit older square televisions. That meant the full camera movement, planets and stars at the edge of the frame simply disappeared, and as a result, viewers spent over a decade seeing a cropped version of that scene and had no idea they were missing half the picture. Director Nick Castle later explained that when the film was finally released on DVD in 1999, it marked the first time in 15 years that audiences at home could see the shot in its proper widescreen format, exactly as it looked in theaters. Why? Because the DVD used letterboxing, black bars at the top and bottom, to preserve the full image. So the next time you watch that opening zoom across space, remember for a very long time, nobody at home had seen it before. Number 17. The director once wore the Michael Myers mask. It may surprise many fans to learn that Nick Castle, the director of The Last Starfighter, once played one of the most frightening killers in horror history. Nick Castle studied film at USC alongside John Carpenter, who later made the legendary slasher movie Halloween. It happened that Carpenter happened to shoot a film near Castle's neighborhood, and he stopped by to visit. Rather than letting him just watch, Carpenter handed Castle a white mask and a pair of coveralls. Castle ended up performing as Michael Myers, the silent killer known as The Shape. That made him the first and original actor to wear the mask, long before the role was passed through at least 9 other actors over the years. But Castle wasn't the only Last Starfighter team member connected to Halloween. Lance Guest, who would later become the hopeful gamer-turned-hero Alex Rogan, had only appeared in 2 movies before being cast, one of which was Halloween 2. At that time, Carpenter was still supervising the final edits on Halloween 2 when Castle began developing The Last Starfighter. Carpenter then showed Castle some rough footage from Halloween 2, and the moment Castle saw Guest on screen, he knew he had found the right lead actor for his sci-fi story. So before The Last Starfighter launched into space, its director and star were already haunting horror fans back on Earth. Number 16. The stars were discovered in surprising ways. Lance Guest grew up in a town where hardly anyone cared about movies, and acting only became serious for him in high school. He chose to study theater in college, where he initially intended to be a stage actor. One day, a casting director at an open call asked him if he had an agent, and when she learned he had none, she made some calls, and he was signed almost immediately. The Guest later admitted he expected the process to be much harder. So how did a theater student become a sci-fi movie hero? As we mentioned earlier, the first film Guest ever booked was Halloween 2. The producer of that movie was John Carpenter, who happened to be very close friends with Nick Castle. Castle was also famous for playing the original Michael Myers in Carpenter's first Halloween film. While Castle and Carpenter were editing Halloween 2, Castle saw Guest on the editing monitor. He liked what he saw and decided Guest was perfect for the role of Alex Rogan. As Guest later said himself, "I kinda got Starfighter and Halloween 2 together. One led to the other thanks to Nick." However, Guest wasn't the only actor discovered in an unusual manner. Catherine Mary Stewart, who played Alex's girlfriend Maggie, started performing even earlier. She grew up in Canada and was a serious dancer in a company called Synergy. After high school, she moved to London to study at the London Studio Centre, a dance-focused institution. While she was there, she attended an open call for a film called The Apple, Just to Dance. During the audition, the director noticed her and asked if she could act. She said yes, and after several rounds of auditions, she landed the lead role. That unexpected moment moved her from dance to acting. She later moved to Los Angeles, and The Last Starfighter became her first American film in which she acted opposite Lance Guest. At the time she was cast as Maggie, Stewart was appearing daily on the TV soap Day of Our Lives. After Starfighter, her career continued to grow as she starred in favorites like Night of the Comet and the comedy hit Weekend at Bernie's, which was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina. Number 15. The on-screen romance worked, because the chemistry was real. When casting The Last Starfighter, director Nick Castle didn't just want two good actors. He wanted two people who could convince the audience that the romance between them was real. During early callbacks, Lance Guest and Catherine Mary Stewart were paired for a private script reading, and soon, they quickly realized their connection was natural and easy. Catherine remembers they were up against many of the hottest young actors in Hollywood at the time, including Ali Sheedy, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Eric Stoltz, but it was she and Lance who were chosen. "It felt comfortable from the very beginning," Catherine said. "It was organic." Lance agreed, saying their chemistry didn't need to be forced or exaggerated. Working together, however, came with very different pressures for each of them. Filming was fast, and sometimes only 2 takes per shot were taken, which Lance found stressful since he was carrying most of the film. Catherine, who had just come off the daily grind of Days of Our Lives, saw the experience as a joy and a break. "I only worked for 3 weeks and I had the best time," she said, calling the set warm, supportive, and playful. Nick Castle's directing style helped keep their scenes fun rather than overly serious. Lance, however, took everything very seriously and kept trying to rehearse with everyone, even veteran stars like Robert Preston, Centauri, and Dan O'Herlihy, Grigg. Both older actors were generous with their time, happily running scenes with the younger lead, even when they could have stayed in their trailers. On the morning he was supposed to film the important Beta Unit bedroom scene, the scene he had originally auditioned with, Lance got into a serious car accident on his way to work. He admits he was probably nervous. His car wrapped around a road island, and he arrived more than 2 hours late. Even though some critics brushed off The Last Starfighter as Star Wars at a trailer park, both Lance and Catherine believe their movie stands on its own. What shocks them is how long it has lasted. "Who would have thought years later people would still be crazy about it?" Catherine said. Lance added that, unlike older actors who relied on rare theater re-releases, Starfighter stayed alive thanks to cable, DVD, and streaming, which allow fans to watch it over and over. Number 14. The trailer park setting was not an accident. In the very first version of the script, Alex and Maggie weren't living in a trailer park at all. Writer Jonathan R. Betuel originally placed them in a comfortable suburban neighborhood and even gave them different names, Skip and Penny. So why did everything change? When director Nick Castle came on board, he worried that a suburban setting would make the film feel too much like a Steven Spielberg movie, especially with films like E.T. and Poltergeist, which had already made suburban fantasy a Spielberg trademark. Castle didn't want audiences to think The Last Starfighter was copying that style. To give the story its own identity, he sought a setting that felt smaller, poorer, and more isolated from the rest of the world. That's how they chose the Starlight Starbright trailer court. Castle said he wanted something isolated but charming, wholesome, and real Americana. The idea was that Alex should start life with limited opportunities, and we even see him get turned down for a college loan at the bank. Number 13. Its visual effects were made using one of the fastest computers on Earth. When The Last Starfighter was released, no science fiction movie had ever depended so heavily on CGI, notwithstanding that 2 years earlier Tron had surprised audiences by using computer-generated imagery to create a digital world inside a computer. But Tron only used about 20 minutes of CGI in a 96-minute runtime, and most of it was done over live-action footage. The Last Starfighter, however, relied on 27 minutes of finished CGI, using it to completely build space battles, spaceships, and alien worlds. This was a huge step in an era when movies like Return of the Jedi still relied on physical miniature models. To create these images, the filmmakers hired Digital Productions, a company that had recently purchased a Cray XMP supercomputer. which was the fastest computer in the world at that time. The machine, which weighed 5.25 tons, processed information so quickly that it had to be cooled with liquid flowing through copper pipes. Only 6 of them existed on Earth. The other 5 were being used by the US government and defense industry, which made Digital Productions the first commercial company to own one. Production designer Ron Cobb even joked that the supercomputer reminded him of the alien monoliths from the 2001 A Space Odyssey because of how advanced and mysterious it seemed. But how much did this jump into the future cost? According to a 1984 report in Computing Today, the movie spent about $3 million on its computer visuals, which was roughly $2,000 for every single second of CGI. That investment propelled digital filmmaking forward and paved the way for even more complex visual effects in the years that followed. Number 12. A brutal torture scene was cut so the film could stay PG. The Last Starfighter is often remembered as a fun, family-friendly movie, but did you know it initially had quite a dark moment? In one scene, the villain, Zur, tortures a captured Starleague spy while Alex Rogan watches in horror. The spy's head is slowly melted by a laser, and the event is broadcast live to Starfighter Command. Originally, the full scene showed the entire top of the spy's skull melting away from the laser. This was a gruesome death meant to underline how cruel Zur truly was. However, director Nick Castle realized it was too intense. He wanted the movie to receive a PG rating, since PG-13 was brand new and not yet trusted by most parents. So, to keep it PG, Castle cut the scene down to only a few seconds, ending just as the spy's forehead begins to glow. In a 1999 DVD audio commentary, Castle admitted the original version was disturbing, saying bluntly, "It hurts when you see someone's brains fry." Are there other reasons why they didn't just use the new PG-13 rating to show it? Well, The Last Starfighter came out in July 1984, only weeks before PG-13 officially launched. The very first PG-13 movie, Red Dawn, didn't hit theaters until August 1984. At that point, it was too late. Castle was not willing to risk confusing parents by testing a new rating. Number 11. Wil Wheaton was almost in the movie. Long before he played Wesley Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation, Wil Wheaton made one of his first film appearances in The Last Starfighter. He was cast as Louie's friend in a few scenes set at the Starlight Starbright trailer court, and he even filmed lines of dialogue for the movie. So why have most fans never noticed him? When the filmmakers went into editing, they removed several smaller moments to reduce the running time, and Wheaton's dialogue was one of the casualties. However, instead of deleting him completely, they left him visible as a background character in a few scenes set in the trailer park. So while he still technically appears in the film, most people never realized he was there unless they looked very closely. Like when he runs around the trailer park early in a red football jersey, and in the final scene, where he is wearing a blue jacket and standing behind Louis Rogan. Number 10. Fans went looking for a video game that never existed. When The Last Starfighter hit test screenings in 1984, teenagers walked straight out of the theater and headed to their local arcades, convinced they could play the same game Alex Rogan had mastered. But there was one problem: the game wasn't real. Director Nick Castle later explained that audiences believed the arcade machine seen in the movie was an actual game and were dying to play it. In truth, Atari was secretly developing a real Last Starfighter arcade game during production. It was a first-person shooter, inspired by the style and mechanics of Atari's earlier Star Wars arcade hit from 1983. However, things quickly fell apart. The movie didn't become a breakout box office success, and the game cabinet was incredibly expensive to build, costing around $10,000 per unit in '84, which is over $31,000 today. Arcade owners didn't want to take that kind of financial risk, especially on a movie tie-in with only modest ticket sales. As a result, Atari canceled the game before it was finished, even scrapping an 8-bit home version that had also been planned. Still, some of the work wasn't wasted. Parts of the unreleased Last Starfighter game were repackaged and later released as Solaris and Star Raiders 2 in 1986. Number 9. Test audiences loved the beta unit, so much they rewrote the movie. The beta unit, Alex Rogan's goofy android double, was never supposed to be a major part of The Last Starfighter. His job was simply to stay behind on Earth and pretend to be Alex while the real Alex battles aliens in space. But because the beta doesn't understand how humans act, he kept getting things hilariously wrong, and audiences loved it. So, what did the filmmakers do when early viewers wanted more of him? Like many movies, The Last Starfighter underwent test screenings, where unfinished versions were shown to different audiences to gauge their reactions. These screenings are used to measure what is working, what's boring, and what needs more attention. When viewers consistently said the beta scenes were their favorites, the studio decided to go back and film extra scenes to expand his role. This wasn't as easy as it sounds. Lance Guest, who played both Alex and the beta, had already chopped off his hair after finishing his original shoot. For the added scenes, the crew had to fit him with a large, poofy wig to match the original footage. Things got messier when Guest became sick during the reshoots, and his skin tone changed. As a result, the makeup team had to layer on extra foundation and powder just to keep him looking like himself on camera. Number 8. Robert Preston's final big screen performance. Did you know Centauri was played by a Hollywood legend, giving his final movie performance? Many fans never realized that the actor who played the fast-talking alien recruiter Centauri was not just anyone. He was Robert Preston, a legendary stage and movie actor, best known for playing the charming con man Harold Hill in the 1962 musical The Music Man. Screenwriter Jonathan R. Betuel loved Preston's work in that film so much that he pushed for him to be cast in The Last Starfighter. Once Preston agreed to take the part, the filmmakers went back and rewrote the character of Centauri so that he behaved even more like Harold Hill. Preston himself admitted he played Centauri using the same approach he used for Harold Hill. So why is that so important? The Last Starfighter ultimately became Robert Preston's final theatrical film. After this film, he appeared in only 2 smaller projects, which were both made for television movies, before he passed on due to lung cancer in March 1987 at the age of 68. So, when you watch Centauri convince Alex Rogan to join a war among the stars, you are watching a beloved Hollywood legend giving his final big screen performance in a role that was quite literally written with him in mind, which makes his last wink to Alex hit differently, doesn't it? Number 7. The movie struggled in theaters, then slowly became a cult classic. Did you know The Last Starfighter didn't make a big splash when it first came out on July 13th? At the time, theaters were already packed with smash hit movies like Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Star Trek III, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and The Karate Kid. Additionally, the video game industry was experiencing a severe downturn due to the overwhelming presence of subpar games on the market. So, an original science fiction film about a boy whose skill at a video game sends him into space to fight aliens was quite a hard sell. The story itself was inspired by the legend of King Arthur, especially The Sword in the Stone by T.H. White. Instead of pulling a sword, teenager Alex Rogan proves himself by getting the high score on a mysterious arcade game in his rural trailer park. The game, it turns out, is a recruiting tool used by aliens to find real-life starfighters to help protect the galaxy against Zur and the Kodan Armada. The movie wasn't a failure and made about $28 million worldwide on a $13 million budget, but compared to 1980s giants like E.T. and Back to the Future, it didn't come close. With no big celebrity names, no sequel, and no toy line or best-selling merchandise to keep it in stores, The Last Starfighter slowly faded from public view. So, why are we discussing this now? Over time, home video releases, cast reunions at fan events, and the rise of internet culture helped keep the movie alive. Viewers kept discovering it on VHS and DVD, and its mix of heart, humor, and early CGI won more love as the years went by. Today, more than 40 years later, it is widely regarded as a true cult classic, celebrated by fans worldwide. Number 6. The movie was compared to Star Wars. Remember, we mentioned how the film struggled in theaters against giants like Star Wars and Ghostbusters? Well, at the time of its release, many people didn't just overlook The Last Starfighter, they also compared it directly to Star Wars. But Lance Guest, who played Alex Rogan, never agreed with that. I was actually more of a Star Trek fan, he explained. He didn't grow up loving Star Wars, so when people compared his character to Luke Skywalker, he felt the tone was different. As he put it, although Star Wars is funny, we had a more tongue-in-cheek attitude. Lance explained that everything in the trailer park scenes was real and had been shot in an actual trailer court. But once Alex left Earth, most of the film was created using green screens and sets at MGM Studios. When he sat inside the Gunstar cockpit, he wasn't flying. He was strapped into a kind of spinning gyroscope cage, while technicians moved him instead of moving the camera. Also, when Centauri and Alex land on Rylos, the background isn't real. It was just a stage filled with fake rocks. Furthermore, Catherine Mary Stewart shared that in the final scene, where the giant spaceship lands back in the trailer park, there was no spaceship at all. They had a huge fan blowing dirt at the actors, while the director shouted, "Look up, the spaceship is landing." Number 5. The game in the movie was fake, and so was Alex's arcade skill. Remember how we said people left the theater hunting for a real Starfighter arcade game? Here's what they didn't know. Even the one on the movie set wasn't real. In the story, Alex Rogan saves the galaxy by mastering an arcade game. And yes, Atari did build a working prototype during production, but the machine used during filming was just a clever prop. Actor Lance Guest explained that it was a box with fake joysticks, glowing buttons, and a TV monitor that played a pre-recorded cassette tape of the game in action. It was based on things like Space Invaders, but nothing I was doing controlled it, Lance said. I had to memorize the video on the screen and pretend I was reacting to it, like lip-syncing a video game. So if the legendary game wasn't even real on set, did Lance keep anything from production? Not what you would expect. When filming wrapped, he didn't take the prop cabinet home. Instead, the wardrobe let him grab several pairs of Adidas shoes and a few Levi's 501 jeans. And what's more, he even gave some to his brother. So the video game that launched Alex Rogan never actually existed, but it did help him score a lifetime supply of sneakers. Number 4. It was shot in just 40 days and hid a secret joke you might have missed. For a sci-fi movie packed with alien planets, spaceships, and cutting-edge CGI, you might think The Last Starfighter took months to film. Well, that's not even close. The entire shoot was completed in just 40 days. That's a very tight schedule, especially for a film trying to create a whole universe. And buried inside that fast-paced shoot is a blink and you'll miss it joke made just for movie nerds. Watch closely during the scene where Alex Rogan leaves the Starfighter briefing to go after Centauri, just before he bumps into Grig. In the background, there's an announcer with a friendly, folksy voice saying, "Now, Starfighters, if you reach underneath your seats, you will find a packet which contains..." It might sound odd, unless you've seen Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which was made in 1964. That line is a direct parody of the survival kit briefing given to the bomber crew in that Cold War classic. Not only did they make the movie in record time, but they also still had room to sneak in a secret tribute to one of the great political satires of all time. Number 3. The main villains were designed to look like devils on purpose. The alien bad guys in The Last Starfighter, the Kodan Armada, weren't just meant to look scary. Production designer Ron Cobb admitted he intentionally made them resemble something much more ancient and unsettling: satanic figures. That's why the Kodan leaders have horns on their heads, horns on their chins, deep red skin, and even a strange monocle worn by their commander, Lord Krill. Cobb wanted their appearance to immediately signal evil, even without words, and their creepiness didn't stop with how they looked. Cobb also described their crew members as being enslaved in the circuits of their mothership, suggesting they were locked into its systems with no escape, almost like prisoners trapped inside their technology. There's even an odd moment in the film that Cobb later laughed about. When the Kodan mothership tears a hole in the frontier, the defensive energy wall, they decide to launch meteors at Starfighter Command rather than just using advanced weapons. Cobb called this a silly choice and joked that they did it so they could claim plausible deniability instead of openly firing lasers, metal projectiles, or actual ordnance, even though those would have worked better. So next time you see the Kodan Armada on screen, remember that they weren't just villains, they were designed to look like the devil's own army. Number 2. half the movie was a blind gamble. As the end credits roll, director Nick Castle and production designer Ron Cobb reveal that making The Last Starfighter was a giant leap of faith. Why? Because half the movie was going to be created inside a computer, and at the start, no one knew if the technology would work. Castle admits he hired Cobb, who had worked with John Carpenter on Dark Star and Dan O'Bannon on Alien, because he needed someone who wasn't afraid to experiment. Together, they decided to use CGI for almost all the space scenes, something no one had ever attempted on this scale before. How risky was that decision? Castle jokes that if the final rendered images didn't look better than the rough placeholders they were testing, the movie could have ended up looking like Gumby in outer space. He laughs about going into production knowing that half the movie was a question mark, but they believed the gamble was worth it, and history proved them right. Number 1. Fans have been begging for a sequel for years. Ask any loyal fan of The Last Starfighter what they want most, and you'll hear the same answer: a sequel. Surprisingly, the people who want it just as badly are the actors themselves. At the 2012 question and answer panel during the Second Blood at the Beach convention in Virginia Beach, Lance Guest and Catherine Mary Stewart reunited and confirmed that they would happily return to their roles if Hollywood ever gave the green light. There were talks, Lance admitted. Scripts were written and ideas came and went, but getting a movie made is complicated. The studio has to be willing to back it. Catherine agreed. We would love to do a sequel, but we don't have the power to decide that. While the original movie earned around $29 million on a $15 million budget, it became a cult favorite thanks to constant showings on cable in the 80s and 90s. Its blend of heart, early CGI, and video game wish fulfillment struck a chord. Even the arcade cabinet became a collector's dream item. In recent years, new rumors spread about a sequel or reboot, especially after Rogue One co-writer Gary Whitta confirmed he was developing a script with screenwriter Jonathan Betuel. But maybe part of the movie's long-lasting charm comes from the fact that it never got that sequel. As Catherine reflected, the 80s were a magical time. There was money, originality, and heart. The Last Starfighter is basically a beautiful, simple story about two young people in extraordinary circumstances, and it's something any kid can relate to. Now, on every anniversary, the film is celebrated not just as nostalgic fun, but as a landmark of imagination. It dared to say that video games could lead to greatness and that ordinary people could become heroes. Or, as Centauri would put it, "Greetings, Starfighter, you have been recruited." So there you have it, 20 remarkable truths hiding beneath the pixels and starlight of The Last Starfighter. So, Starfighter, after everything you've just learned, do you believe one simple game could change your destiny too? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.